I'm Karen Bailey, and we'll be doing a training today, of course, on ethics. So part of this is, every year, or, for some of us professionally, we're required to have trainings in ethics regularly. Sometimes it's every year, every other year. Everybody's different, maybe different, but yet ethics doesn't really change. So it's not like I have some new innovative, like I just did research on ethics and now we're going to study it. It's really to challenge you to be a better you professionally, then and maybe remember things that you had forgotten, or challenge you to open your eyes to say, hey, I need to work on some things, or maybe I need to look at that case a little differently, and maybe I've been kind of overstepping. That's really the purpose of ethics, is because it's easy to kind of not pay attention and to do something that you're not planning to do, that you don't think you'll ever do, but yet it's easy to get comfortable in things that are not always the greatest. So that's the purpose of any ethics training. No one ever told me that, but that's my view on it. So here we go. So these are the areas we're going to cover: ethics and boundaries, autonomy and agency, and keeping yourself on track ethically. So like, obviously there's boundaries, even like in the most basic sense, which I think clients understand, is that we have boundaries in like this room. I'm in a room. That's a wall. That's a boundary. There's a boundary. And I sometimes, with clients that are, this is just a little add in, like, when I'm talking to clients about what a boundary is, it's kind of like helping them recognize, like, I'm in a room right now with you. Why don't we do this in the lobby? Well, no client says, yeah, let's go to the lobby. Everybody understands that there's a place of privacy. There's an understanding that we go into certain spaces because it's the best for us to be private or to be focused. It doesn't always have to be just about privacy, but it's important to recognize that we're looking at how boundaries should be, and should they look differently, and where the issues can. When do boundaries get blurry or unclear? What is appropriate or inappropriate, and what is outside your role? These are things we're going to be talking about. So these aren't necessarily things for you to answer right this minute, but it's kind of recognizing what's outside your role. If we never talk about what's outside your role, then you won't know, maybe, hey, I'm kind of stepping outside that role. That's kind of stuff we're going to be talking about today. When is it okay to go over the line? And when do your feelings override ethical standards? I think this, for us, I would say personally, that's something I've had to always watch, is where my feelings want to override my standard, the ethical standards, because it's not because I'm just bad. It's because I care. And sometimes I have to tell myself I am still the professional here. So my feelings, I can validate my feelings to myself, maybe talk to someone else about it, but at the same time, it's recognizing that I still need to keep the standard that is there, because that is how that's where healthiness is for myself and my client, and it's my professional commitment. So when it comes to ethical standards, these are things that we're looking at so we're looking at respecting someone's personhood. It's kind of watching your language, and verbal and what you're nonverbal. Because sometimes we very subtle. Now, those of you who have worked with trauma clients recognize that your clients have learned survival by noticing changes in someone's behavior, or how they just little slight changes, because that's how they survived. So in that same respect, recognize that sometimes, are there times that you need to kind of like school your features, and to recognize what's underneath that, so that you are giving people the right answers, or that they feel respected and they feel like that you're open to what they're saying. Clients have the right to privacy. Now, I always like to say this, as you'll see in the next line, we are mental health professionals and not the FBI. Now, I say that humorously, because I think you guys know you're not in the FBI, but at the same time, I say that because the FBI, their job is, like, if there's a problem, there's something that they're investigating, it's their job to go all through it, make sure everybody's telling the truth, everybody's doing this, they have the facts to back it up, because if they ever go to court, blah, blah, blah. But that's not us. That's not me. I'm a therapist. When someone comes to see me, 98% of the time, they're not court ordered. They may or may not want to be there, but it is not my job to figure out if they're telling me the truth other than what I see in front of me. If I'm challenging their behaviors or something they say and that contradicts something else they said, that's of course my job. But it's not my job to check on social media or to look in other places or to talk to somebody that I don't have, that maybe is their emergency contact or something else, just to say, are they telling the truth here? Now, sometimes with kids, there is some pieces of that it's okay to learn from parents what's going, their perspective, but it's important to recognize it's not my main focus is to help a client change. And so if I am looking at all these other pieces, then it becomes distracting from helping them to focus, because all of a sudden I'm learning all kinds of things. I've been a therapist longer than social media. I've been a therapist, before the internet was before it was really a thing. So all that to say is, back in the day, the only way I got to know things is if people told me them, and that's actually the best way for therapists. Now, again, because I'm a therapist, not because, there are other people in the world, that's their job to understand those pieces more. So it's kind of recognizing, when do I want to kind of figure things out more? When do I want to know more? And I would want to do that outside of the parameters of my job. That's kind of where I have to be challenged. It's important to recognize that trust is what builds people to share. If you know something because of some, because randomly sometimes you do learn about something that has from someone else, it's really important to kind of recognize it's important to build that trust and not to say, yeah, I learned about you, because that's really not helpful. It doesn't help them to trust you more. So it's in respecting their privacy in those things. Clients have the right to privacy. So this is from the ACA Code Ethics. Counselors respect the privacy of their client's social media unless given consent to view such information. The code says if we're given consent, but I like to caution that super a lot, because I know that I have a good chunk of clients whose boundaries are not very strong, and they don't really recognize me as someone who is their therapist that should have these clear boundaries. They think of me as someone they like. So if I just went by that information, I asked their consent, they might go ahead. So this is something that would not be okay. I think that the main purpose, if I was watching, there are things that if my client wanted me to understand something that was on social media, that's not a problem. It's just that probably should be done with the client. That's the way that is more ethically, that they're showing me what they want to show me. If there's something specific that's a concern of theirs, there's nothing wrong with that, because they're the ones showing me. They're in control of that. And that would be, I think, that would be more of a best practice to watch, because there's no reason to that really does get in the way of you doing the work you're supposed to be doing. Even them asking you, I would be cautious about, only because it can be a distraction. But there's times that it wouldn't be, that it's appropriate, but that's of course up to your discretion. And it would be more no than yes of getting on it. So they have the right to privacy. Clients have the right to privacy. Privacy when you're having a virtual appointment. So this is important for you, those of you who talk to people like this in this virtual set kind of way, that you are adamant that you do not casually let them be wherever they're at. And I know, as I've said, I'm a therapist, but if you are doing any other job that is, you say, well, I'm not a therapist. That's okay. It doesn't matter. You are still doing confidential work. So it's important for you to feel strong and feel confident to say when you're in a setting, if you see, the screen comes up and you see where they're at, if you don't feel like it's a secure setting, it's your place to say, who's with you? Where are you? And to ask questions, because sometimes it's they're in the main part of the house and it's hey, I'm just cooking dinner. I mean, people say, I've heard a lot of things in 5 years. So people say different things, but it's really important for you to ask. I had a situation a while back where the screen came on, and the mom was moving the child who's my client, he was about 10-ish, out to, I learned that they were at a restaurant and he was going to go out and sit outside on the like the patio furniture, and there was nobody out there. And she's like, "Well, there's nobody out here." And so that's why I was going to do this. Well, that just sounds, I mean, the kid already had ADHD. That was like, but that's not really the point. The point is, it's my job to make sure he's safe when he's sharing. I just thought to myself, first of all, how focused would he be if he's just been exiled and there's a bunch of stuff around him? And that's like a logical, that's how my brain works. But the real point is that it's not private and confidential. So mom was okay with it. She said it's okay on our end, but I said no, it's not okay on my end. Right now we just need to reschedule because you're at breakfast, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not when our therapy is done. Therapy is hard work. When you're in it and you have to focus, or it shouldn't be something like you're yapping with your friend. And I don't have no problem with her. It's just that I had to be the one to explain that. That was my job. It wasn't her job. She wouldn't do anything wrong. It was my job to set the tone and to lead her. And so she had no problem with it. We rescheduled. The world went on. But I share that story to remind you that it's your job. If they're in a situation and your gut and what you see and what you hear is that they're not private, is for you to pause it, because privacy is important. Counselors avoid entering into a non-professional relationship with former clients, their romantic partners, or their family members when the interaction is potentially harmful to the client. This applies to both in-person and electronic interactions. Counselors are prohibited from engaging in virtual relationships with individuals who they have current counseling relationships. Whenever I think of it, I'm going to be honest, I like people. So there's some people that if they were my neighbor, I would, and I never knew them as a client, I would enjoy that. But that's really like me just saying they're cool people. It is not my place to ever, connect with them. So if they do discharge, and there is ethically, they say after so many years, you're allowed to like have connection with them. But I have to ask myself, why would I want to? Like, what is it about that I would want to re-engage a person? Or, I mean, that's seems like I really shouldn't ever want to. It's really set up that way ethically, so that if you happen to go, like 5 years, a client that I had 10 years ago, and we happen to be like our children are at the same school, or something happens where I'm in a club that's they're into, etc., then it's like ethically, it's not as much of an issue because there's been so much distance in time. It's not for me, of course, to pursue a relationship. Hey, it's been 5-10 years now. Woohoo! Now I can be a friend with that person. That's goes on the creepy side. So I just encourage you to kind of recognize it's okay to acknowledge to yourself that this person is someone that they're an enjoyable person, that I enjoy that relationship. But it's also important for you to recognize that it's professional, and that means it is limited in the boundaries as well as how much time you'll be with them. Clients are also expected to respect your privacy. Although clients may struggle with boundaries, it is a mental health professional's responsibility to keep your personal stories, especially the current ones, from clients. Give clear instructions on how to reach out to you to cancel an appointment, or how, if a message is to be given, the clear instructions if there's about crisis, 24-hour crisis line, how to use emergency services, etc. And clear guidelines about texting. So the part of this, that why this is important, is because when a client feels comfortable with you, that doesn't mean that they should have your beck and call. I'm clear with my clients that, some of them, a majority of them, they might get my work cell phone number because it's for a variety of reasons. But I explained to them that I document in my notes that I explained that I'm available on this phone during work hours. This is not okay for crisis, and this is not okay after hours. Now, if you put something in after hours because you're planning to tell them just to because, hey, I just want to let you know this, that I don't have a problem with that. But I also encourage that this is not confidential, which goes on to my next slide. When it comes to ethics, and texting, it's really important to recognize that it is not confidential. So it really should be used very minimally. If my client says I'm running late, that's not really that's okay. But some people, because of their phones, they have more texting capability than they do phone calls. So sometimes they'll just feel like it's okay to get, to talk and, they're going to tell me this whole big story. And I just, politely say, texting is not for confidential. And it is for you to tell me I need to call you. I need to talk. Can you call me today soon? Because I have something to share with you that's important. That's okay. But it's not okay to put all that information on there. And so that's where I encourage the clients to, they need to learn to call me when they have a problem, or they need to learn these other ways when they're going to, I'm not going to be available. And that's really important to kind of get that way. And of course, any texting needs to be agreed upon after they get a consent. There's consent. Our forms have it in there. Is texting okay? So if they don't sign that, or if that's not their preferred a way of communicating, then there is no texting. So it's important, if you haven't looked recently on your in the files of your clients, it might be a good idea to recognize, are they, where the permissions are, because that will help you to know, you did not, this is not the way you didn't even consent to this. So, and it's your job to lead that, even if they are the ones that initiate the text message. Recognizing it's easier for them to use the phone calls that are the way the system is set up. I know in our agency, there's a way that they're going to reschedule appointments or stuff like that. So these are all things that I encourage you to kind of recognize, because when the story gets told, is there going to be a challenge here where your client looks like they were texting you and then you didn't answer it when it was a point of need. That's what we're trying to avoid, that there would be a time where someone was in crisis and they thought, Karen is always available and I'm going to reach out. But that night I was, I was at the movies, or I was doing whatever. And so I didn't see that text. And then, so they didn't have the support they needed. That's not ever the focus of phones. Some of this has happened more, I want to say, since COVID, because some of my clients, didn't have, I mean, I had a cell phone, but not everybody did at the agency, but less people had it then. But it really wasn't just that. It's that, like, for my adolescent clients, I didn't have their phone numbers because they were always seeing me in person. But now that it's a little different, and now that I could see them virtually, often I have, both the parent and the client's numbers, which is important for me to set those boundaries of why I would have their phone number to kind of and how do I need to talk to them. Sounds like we're doing good. So good. So we're just going to carry on with these questions. So we're just going to go through one of these at a time, because I think that these are really, I don't know, it's just very good for you to think them through before anything like similar could happen. You attend an event at a friend's house to realize that one of her new friends is your client. Yes, it can happen. Your friend wasn't aware of your connection to your client, but invited the person as a new friend. So, if we were in person, I'd say, what do you guys think? But so I'm saying it to you guys, what do you think? What is your thoughts on that? I like what I'm saying. So I'm hearing I would probably leave. I'd probably give an excuse. I would try to keep my professional distance, be polite and cordial, not overshare, leave early, leave and keep boundaries. I've always been taught to allow the client to navigate. So I think these are really great. I think the challenge is really, you guys are giving me some good information. I think the challenge really is that it's how I would feel, is kind of like, well, this is my friend who's kind of like, I'm not working right now. I'm just doing my thing, like in socializing and having my life. And then somebody's in my space, so to speak. And I'm not saying that because I'm offended by them. I'm just saying, I'm being real with you. But part of it, the best standard is really to kind of, you don't want to make your goal is not to make a fuss. and is to act like you don't know them. It's probably best. You have to gauge your own comfort. And in the range of clients, some clients it would be like interesting, but it wouldn't be as stressful as other clients. That's how it would be for me. Some of my clients, I'd be like, oh my. And other clients would be like, oh, okay, how do we do this? But mainly it's your job to be respectful and to act like, and to, like, let them be the ones who, say, if they were going to talk to you, I wouldn't go up to them and say, hey, it's good to see you. It would be like almost like I don't know them, and I would kind of give them some space to do, like, to not be among them. If it's a smaller group, it would be kind of a bigger challenge. If it was like 5 people, that might be a little bit more of a challenge, but it is kind of respecting, and I would be guarding what I would be saying in a different way because of the fact that I would, I'm not trying to share my story. And I think it's awkward for them too, even if they think it's kind of cool that they see you. What a nice surprise, because I like you. It's best to, you're being like a little quieter about it. Your client friend requests you on social media. This is a client who has similar interests, and she's about to be discharged. So tell me what you think, and then tell me why I put that little extra in there that there's something that you like about that person, which would be more of a temptation. But what would be your response in that situation? Mm-hmm. Love it, everyone. Run the other way. Like, no way. Right. Block and decline. Yeah. It's just, there's that is clear. Exactly. Everyone seems to get it. Stay away. And don't go on their site before you decline it. Just say, no, that's not okay. And now this is a conversation to have with them when you see them next. This is assuming that they're not discharged yet, that you can actually have a conversation and say, you put this out, I noticed that your request, and this is and I'm not gonna let you be my friend on social media, on Facebook or whatever, and explain why that is, because that's important for them to understand that side. Sometimes when we just ignore it, sometimes it can be confusing to them, and it's important for them. The more we can be open about that, because that's our boundaries, it's important to know. I even think of that when I answer that when I read that question, I think about my standards when it comes to my social media accounts. I have them like so private that, I don't have it where my friends can see it. I have it where my friends only can see if I post something. It's really important to kind of recognize that how people can come into your site that you don't know. And I mean, I think that for everybody that's true. And I would caution anybody who isn't a professional, but I think it's extra important because it's really not important. It's not really great if your clients, you don't know that your client is somehow friends with somebody, and then somehow they're able to come see your stuff. It's really important that they really can't find anything, and that they see very little of what you might put out there. I think that's best practice, because so that I stay, so things stay in the right lane. So number 3, your client's boyfriend has been controlling towards her, but she loves him and she doesn't want to leave him. What is the challenge here, and what would be your response? Like, what would be your response to said client like this? Teach how boundaries and negotiation techniques. So recognizing what is more controlling and that sort of thing. Right. Listen, not give advice. Discussing boundaries, looking at, relationships. So ultimately it's her decision. So the goal is that, yes, we're going to help with boundaries. Yes, we're going to help her understand sometimes where she feels responsible for him when it isn't her responsibility to take care of him, where she's rescuing and maybe, doing inappropriate things. Maybe I'd show her a video of like what, domestic violence looks like. And, it help her self-reflect on it. But ultimately, it's not my decision. It's not the same as if the child is 15 and we're talking about abuse in her, by her father or her mother. that's completely different, because that as a child, I'm looking at, is that an abuse? Do I need to call CPS? But as an adult, that person has the right to be in a relationship that we would say, I would love for her to leave. Like, it's okay. I can, they have the right to make the choices that they do. And that's important, because when we like our clients, we want good for them. And sometimes that can be where we're challenged in this. So number 4 is, you are challenged by what your client's trauma by your client's trauma history and what he is walking through right through now. You fear that you are gossiping if you are talking to a colleague about that. This is a little different. So I ask you, what if you had a challenging client like this, what would be the how would you address that fear if you felt it, or if you had a colleague that was saying that? Talk to your colleague, seeking consultation, supervision, challenging this, recognizing that there's a place for consultation when needed. And you need to be aware, and it isn't gossiping unless you're like, can you believe? And you recognize, like you're really like, but if you're struggling because of what you're hearing, I think that makes you human. Some of our clients walk through things that it like is what? It's a lot. It's a lot sometimes. I had one of those weeks last week, just a lot of things that just made me sad. And it's a place for me to say something. To the appropriate colleagues, the people who can help me. Particularly probably not the person, the support desk at the front desk. Particularly, there's people that are more, that can support me in those changes. So you guys, thumbs up. You guys did a great job. So now we're moving on to part 2, which I call agency and autonomy. Agency has been like a word that I've been using this year, not because I work at an agency, but because agency is the capacity, condition, or state of acting or exerting power. So and as along with autonomy, self-directed freedom. So I like those because we want our clients to have agency. Now, we know there's exceptions that sometimes children, they're overrid by with their parent, what their parents say is, they have the right to certain things. The parents have the right to do things. And also they have a guardian. But at the same time, we want to encourage in those relationships, where can they make choices? But in general, I'm saying agency is like, how do I encourage them to be their own person and not just be like, we don't want them to be duplicates of us. We don't want it to be like, they think we like this and that's why we say them. We want to learn who they are and that they feel like they can be open to just be who they are. So dignity and respect. So I think of this with agency because it kind of keeps it's always keeping myself in place when I'm doing something. So that I keep focused on caring and being respectful. Respecting someone's personhood. Again, watching your language. It's my responsibility to understand cultural competency. It doesn't mean I understand 100% of every cultural issue that's out there for all the different races and cultures, because that would be, that's a lot. But it does mean that I can be curious and ask questions, because it can be that I can ask, not make assumptions. And because even in, depending on where a person's from, often has more of an issue, has an effect on their cultural competency than their actual ethnicity or race. So it's important to ask questions. That's how I show my respect for them, is like, I'm a learner. I think that goes a long way when people recognize that you are willing to learn something. Respecting their privacy, that you don't tolerate gossip. Again, the more that you are a professional and you've been doing it longer, you become aware when people might say something, or, like, wow, did you notice that? Or, sometimes it's like, sometimes people can, wonder about that person that just, was walking in with you. But it's important for you to you're protective in that area, because we don't tolerate that. And recognizing that whether you're with the client behind closed doors, or with the client, or behind closed doors with staff, it is important to respect our clients' in the manner we would want our own loved ones to be treated if they were receiving services here or somewhere else. That's important. That's a great way of thinking about it. It would be I also think of that in terms of like when people will start, like, even if it's a legit conversation, where am I when I'm having that conversation? It should be behind closed doors. It should be in a way that it is not in the hallway. It's not in a way of like at the like the door eaves like the where it's like I'm kind of like I'm not really in. But if I'm starting to if I'm talking about what I'm going to have for lunch, yeah, that don't matter. But if I'm talking about something that is about any client for any reason, it really, it needs to be behind the doors. It needs to be where the door is closed, where it's not going to be heard by other people, because that is respect. Because I wouldn't want to know that where I went to the doctors or any other services, that if I went there, that they were like, I would hate to have to, like, they thought I was gone and I went down I actually just went to the bathroom and found out, oh, they're talking about me. That would not be a good feeling. And it's really important to kind of, we are called to have that higher standard. So this is a new concept that I added to this training. Sorry, again, paternalism. This is something I learned from a training I experienced, because ironically, I'm giving this ethics training, but ethically, it's probably best practice that I have to, do my own ethics training on my own. So, and this is what I learned about some terms, and they call it paternalism. It's and this is where where a professional or can think or believe that they have a better understanding than the client of what is in their best interest of the client. So this can be conscious or subconscious, and it's really, I mean, sometimes you might not even notice it, where you can have that kind of bias. The examples I give, one is like if the person from a lower income, that they're going to be more resistant, or they're going to have this, it's kind of like being prideful and thinking that you know something about them, or that and the other example is, if you think the client would benefit from mental health skill building, you might be 100% correct that they would benefit from a service, but they don't want it. Paternalism would be if you thought that you had the opinion, you told them, but then you decide, you know what, it's still important, so I'm going to put that referral in so that they can get that service without their permission. You're not their parent. That's why it's paternal. You're not their parent. It's not your job. And even if you had their parents involved, and they are an adult, and they are not a guardian, there's no guardianship. The client really does have the right to say, I don't want to do this. And that's really important to remember, because we can want the best for them, but they have to want it, and it's really their decision. That is that sense of agency, and we want to respect that. So I call it the dignity of risk. So the dignity of risk. Clients have the right to make risks and choices to be autonomous and independent. It is not our role to take choice away. It's okay for you to tell them if there's a concern, but again, you have to like put yourself out of it. It's not what you would say. It may be different. It can't just be like what you would say to one of your friends or your kids. It has to really be that here's some good information. And if they're really asking for it, because ultimately, if they decide, that lady we talked about earlier who was with that guy who decided to, felt like her boyfriend was controlling, and she decided to marry him, she has the choice to do that. We might be sad by it, but really she does have the choice. So those of you who may or may not know, one of my specialties is working with the neurodiverse population and autism. So I always like to put a little bit in there, because sometimes they don't always have a voice that they really should be able to have, because they're human, and so I like to always put in here. So this is actually from the Self-Advocacy Network. I had taken a training, and also I've heard them on different speakers from the trainings I've been in. And so they have a website. The website is called Self Advocacy Network. If you're interested, or if you work with these populations. So autistic people have the same right to give and refuse informed consent and assent as a non-autistic person. Of course, the exceptions can be if they really do have a guardian that says this is the important thing. But at the same time, we need to recognize that respect, because if they don't really want to be here, how helpful are you really? So for some things, it's for safety. There's some things that would override that, but in general, they have the right to refuse. Giving in another area of ethics is with those who are neurodiverse, is to recognize, to give the person space to move around, to take breaks, to feel comfortable. So for some of my clients who are autistic, or even just have ADHD or other, I recognize that sometimes a full hour session, I have to kind of read them. Are they really, I think we're done. I think we finished what we're going to do. It doesn't have to be a certain length of time. It has to be what's helpful for them. And it's also recognizing that after a while, they might get fidgety. It might be helpful to move around. It might be helpful to, I'm holding a fidget, like, do you have, they might need something to not to always be intense. And that's respecting their needs, because sometimes that's how they're going to do the best, is if they feel like they can move around and that they don't always have to sit like how they would at the doctor's office. They might not do that well there either. So, and I love this last one. It says presumed competence, presuming that with the right supports, they are capable of learning, thinking, communicating, and gaining skills. So that's kind of putting, again, an air of respect. Sometimes we can look, well, they can't do what other people can do. And it's like, and we just kind of treat them sometimes like children. Right now, my population of clients that are neurodiverse are more adults with some adolescents. So I'm working with them because I'm trying to help them to advocate for themselves. And of course, there are other things that we're working on. But it's really important to recognize that, they may just need some more support. For some of my clients, it's hard for them to understand some of our, we have lots of policies because we're of our agency, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we have to recognize that some of that is like, doesn't really matter to them, or get, and I have to kind of help them so that they can get, and I support them so that they can get what they need. And so we get the paperwork done, we get what we need to get done, but I recognize that they might need some extra support. It may take a little longer for them to grasp what's going on, and that I don't just like rush through things because I have to check the box. And here's another boundary: discharge. So I like to say that because, I don't discharge my friends, like I don't discharge my family. That's not what I do in my non-professional life. But when I say hello to somebody and I meet somebody as in my profession, there is going to always be a time when I say, we're done, that this is going to be done. And it's important, the more you're talking about it. When I was a new clinician, this was the hardest thing to do, because I was good at connecting with people. It was hard for me to tell them at first, like, hey, we're going to do this for a certain amount of time. This is the amount of time we have to do this, or whatever it would be, or to keep the conversation going. But it's vital that I recognize that I have to put those boundaries in. It's really important with children, because children on their own, my observation, my first really where I worked a lot was in in-home. I loved it. But the thing I hated the most was discharge, because kids don't have the maturity to recognize, I'm a professional, I'm working with them, I'm in their home for a certain amount of time, and when their behaviors get, at a certain place, then I will discharge them. That's not something that comes to them. Unless they don't like you. That's really that's not how they think. But it's important for me to not I still have to do it. I still have to help them understand it and just feel like it's okay. I like the fact that they liked me, or that we worked well together, and it's okay to grieve the loss, but it's still a boundary. It still needs to be there. And so it's important to say that. So when I say this, also, for my agency, we have a no-show policy. It's very clear. They review it annually, and if not more. And it's important to discuss it because they need to understand that discharge will happen if they don't, make their appointments. Eventually, that won't be okay. We just won't keep them on the books if they're really not coming. So it's important to have these conversations about what are you really doing? What are is this what you want? And I also document on those things. It should happen. It should be just a regular conversation. The more that you get used to sharing that, we're going to this is how often we're going to talk about discharge, or from the very beginning, it makes them understand. They're understanding that they're not thinking that you're rejecting them, because that's not our goal, is to make them feel rejected at the end. Our job is to really kind of help them see that this is for a season and for a purpose, and then eventually you'll be able to, you won't need me forever. And for some clients, because they don't have social connections, that can feel very distressing to them. But that's what we're trying to help them with, is to kind of have those social connections and not realize we're not rejecting them. But so that's why we're talking about it. So we are preparing our clients with life without me. Some I'll have longer than others because of their issues and needs, but really my goal is that they get discharged. Just kind of like when you think of parenting, parents will say, my job is that I don't have a job anymore, that my kids, when they become adults, can handle life. And they don't need me like they needed me when they were 10. That's the goal. So abandonment is a serious ethical violation that is avoided when there's clear discussions about goals, contracting, discharge, and the no-show policy. I find this to be more of a challenge sometimes with adolescents, or sometimes with my adult clients, that feel like this is like the place I get to vent. And it's hard for them sometimes to grasp, but that's really not my job to be like just someone that they dump on. It's really like, how do you grow and change? I get that may be where you start, but it's really like, how do I help you move forward? And sometimes that's difficult. So here's my question to you. How does not discharging a client would be an ethical violation? So I see people talking about codependency. They don't understand the role changes. So when it comes to this question particularly, how does, it's really like it's an ethical violation because you're starting blurring your boundaries because maybe you don't know how to say no to a person. It's like, they really have finished what they're going to do, but they don't want it. They don't want to end. And so that can be but there's not for a good reason that they want to end, just except that they like coming to therapy. Then that's like, you're not helping them to understand what a good discharge is. We call them a good discharge. They learn how to say goodbye to someone and that they did well at something. It can be that because the lines are blurred, because you're not telling people, like you're starting to develop more of a familiar relationship. I'm not saying friendship and you're all like ready to go out to do something together. It's more like you're familiar with them. You're just like, hey, they're just they're always happy to see me. They're easy. That's not a good reason to keep somebody. So that's actually unethical, because I'm starting to develop a relationship with them that is not what particularly it should look like in my job. From the ACA Code of Ethics, counselors terminate counseling relationships when it becomes reasonably apparent that the client no longer needs assistance, is not likely to benefit, or is being harmed by continuing counseling. Counselors provide pre-termination counseling and recommend other service providers when necessary. Counselors do not abandon or neglect clients in counseling. Counselors assist in making appropriate arrangements for the continuation of treatment when necessary during interruptions such as vacation, illness, following termination. So that could be like, really, when someone, when they're going to have surgery, how do we take care of those clients? When there's like somebody just leaves, the agent, leaves us and it's not planned, and how do we take care of those clients? it's really important to we're doing our best to not abandon them. We can't control everything. People sometimes, they can have a serious car accident, their counselor can have a serious car accident, and we have, but our job is, but it's important that even if you're in private practice, to figure out what would you do in play, what would be the protocol if you were by yourself and you were in a place that something happened to you. It's important that there's somebody that can kind of say something, and it can be determined what, there could be a plan that can go into place, that there is another therapist or another support service that can be put in place for the time that you're not available. It means thinking it through. It doesn't make it impossible. It just means these are things that should be thought through, organized, so maybe even written up, because the more is written up, the more it's likely to be, it's going to go better. If you don't know what would happen, to ask your supervisor. There might be a plan that you're not really thinking about, because it's not really come up in your world, but it might be something that would help you to feel like, okay, there's a plan.
So like I said, today I'm going to talk with you about ethics in therapy. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because I didn't realize that the layperson, being people who aren't in the therapy practice themselves and haven't gone to school to become a therapist, didn't realize kind of what their rights are, as well as what's ethically appropriate behavior for a therapist and a therapeutic relationship as a whole. That being said, I just wanted to go over a few of the kind of red flags or things you should know so that you're better protected, because overall I want all of you to have a great therapy experience. I want you to know what appropriate boundaries and what an appropriate therapeutic relationship looks like, and I want you to get the most benefit out of your therapy. And I've heard from some of you, as well as some of my clients, that their experiences have been terrible. You're telling me things and I'm like, you're kidding me, that happened in real life? IRL? No. So the first thing I want to talk with you about is boundaries. Now, I know I talk a lot about boundaries with friends and family and keeping you safe when you have maybe some toxic people in your life, and how boundaries can be important in our recovery. But boundaries can also be important in therapy, because you can't, as a therapist, I can't tell my clients, you can call me anytime and I'll get right back to you, or text me anytime and I'll text you, email me anytime and I'll email you. And having a constant dialogue, no matter what time of day, whatever, isn't appropriate, because the whole goal of therapy is for me to teach you tools. And then during the week, between our sessions, or if I see you twice a week, between those sessions, you practice them, and then you get back to me in my office. To have access 100% of the time, it's not healthy. It causes us to use a therapist as a crutch instead of learning to do things on our own. We're relying on someone else for every decision we make. Does that make sense? And so it's important to notice if a therapist breaches those boundaries right away, saying things like, you can get a hold of me anytime. Obviously, there is protocol. As a therapist, I have a 24-hour period. If it's an emergency, call 911, go to the hospital, check yourself in, call the suicide hotline, but I will get back to you as soon as I can. That's an appropriate boundary. I have a life too. I have other clients too. I can't be on call all the time. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about, and I made some notes, is setting your expectations. As a therapist, it's my responsibility, as are the boundaries. This is all my fault and my responsibility. I'm taking all of this on, is setting your expectations. Now, I never tell my clients, oh, that goal that you set when we first got together, we will fix that lickety split. Don't you worry, we'll get that. Don't ever think that for a second we won't. Everything's gonna be perfect. We will do that. I will always be here. Things will always work out. I can't make those promises. I'm not God or whoever else you believe runs the world, like maybe, Wizard of Oz. I'm none of those things. I can't make things happen. What I can promise you is that I'll be consistent, that we will work together, that we'll be in this process together, and we'll do our best. So that's another important thing, because I've had other clients and other people online telling me that their therapist has told them that, they'd always be there, things would always get better, and this will happen at this time. And we just can't, because what that can lead to is disappointment and then shame and embarrassment, thinking that as the client, we didn't do what we're supposed to do or something because it didn't turn out the way it was supposed to. Am I right? So the way that a therapist should set expectations is letting them know that therapy is a process. It's not perfection. We're working together. It's one step at a time. You let me know if your goals change or if things get harder for you and we'll slow it down or we can speed it up. It's together we work on this. There's no certain time period. There's no assurance that everything is going to get fixed because every situation, every person's different. Am I right? Okay, now the last thing I want to talk about is being clear about the process of therapy. That being said about like confidentiality and limitations to it, I heard from one of my followers that their therapist had said, everything you say in here is a secret between you and I. And that's just not true. Unfortunately, if we think abuse is happening, whether you're going to hurt someone else, like if you're going to endanger the life of someone else or yourself, as I've talked about before, those are reasons that I may have to break confidentiality. I may have to put you in the hospital. I may have to call CPS and report child abuse or elder abuse. There are a bunch of things that I'm legally mandated to report. And this changes state to state and country to country, but overall, I'm sure that they all have something in place. Whereas a therapist, I'm legally bound to do some things and I have to break confidentiality and tell them some things to make sure that everybody stays safe. So those are just some basic 3 points, 3 kind of red flags that I want you to just notice. I want you to be aware of because this is your therapy. This is your process. And as a therapist, the responsibility falls on us. But the more I'm learning is that not every therapist is doing their best with this. Just like we might hire a plumber to come to our house and our toilet may overflow the next day. And we don't really know why. That plumber apparently sucked. But then we get other people to come in and do their job great. Things are fixed. So it's the same with therapy. It's just a job. And some people are really good at their job. They invest a lot in their job and other people aren't. And so I want you to be aware so that we can work together. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I put out videos 5 days a week and you don't.
Keeping yourself on the ethical track. So when you think of like what helps you stay on that ethical track of being, is there anything that you think about that would be helpful? I want to keep my license. Self-care and supervision, consultation, trainings. Yeah, good. Know your policies. Very good. So I see a lot of very similar things that are good that I put in like in my next line, which is so these are things I thought of. And so again, continuing education, good supervision and consultation, being honest in supervision, self-reflection, recognizing your personal boundaries, so which is part of what we've been talking about today. So these are some things that I just kind of bring to you, and these are things to kind of like write down and kind of think about if these are things that are you hesitant to share your situation with your supervisor or a colleague because you're fearful of what they might say? Do you keep information from your supervisors that reflect overinvestment, transference, or countertransference? Is there any client that you give special treatment or don't follow the discharge policy like you would with others? Are you stalking clients on social media or allowing them to follow you or to see your information? Regardless of your professional background, all programs have an ethical standard to follow. Ethical standards are from different professions are similar. We are all accountable. So as you saw, I went to the to the counseling ethics, board of ethics, because I'm a counselor. But really, I think if I went to social work or any of the other ones, it's not like they might be written differently. They might, have different wording, but generally it's not going to be any different. We're looking at how do we show ourselves as best practice, and that sort of thing. It's important as those questions were in the last slide. It's important to kind of challenge yourself. Who would be your temptations? Where would you be challenged? If there's a tendency in you to want to rescue or to be overinvested with certain clients, it's important for you to kind of like raise your hand and tell somebody, because it's not wrong in the sense that you feel the desire to do something. It's wrong that you act upon it. So it's important to kind of be, the more you're transparent with those who you trust, like your supervisor and other trusted colleagues, that can make a big difference. Here's my favorite: do no harm. You are held to a different standard professionally than you are in your personal life. That is, regardless of what you might do in your might or might not do in your personal life, you are held to do something different in your professional. Be mindful of what you say or do, because your clients do see you. They do watch you. They may not always tell you what they're thinking, but the more you are consistent and doing your best to be professional in the sense of doing, staying above board, so to speak, then they notice that. If they think that you do that sloppy, then they may ask you to do things. They might think that it doesn't really matter, and then they may, not respect what you're doing. So what worked for you may not work for them. So that's where we talk about, again, with my friends, I might say, hey, when I went through something similar, blah blah blah, because that's okay. That's what you do among friends or family. But it's not appropriate for me to say that with my clients. It's not at all. So it's important to kind of recognize it may not work. It may be something that you present. I for myself, when it comes to things that are I think, well, they actually might benefit if they did something that I did. Like, say if there is something, but I don't say it like, when I went through something similar, or when I was, 25, I did this. I might just say it like very anonymous, like, have you considered this? I knew somebody who tried this, and leave it like that. So it's not like I'm telling them, I'm not disclosing with them that it was me and I did that, because that's not appropriate. It's not important. Because why is it not appropriate? Not just because they don't need to know my personal life. It's really because if you say Karen did this, then it has a different level of authority than if someone else said that. And they might just listen to you and just do what you tell them to do, when you have a level of authority that would make them do things that maybe they wouldn't do if they didn't know what you did in that situation. Does that make sense? We don't really want them to know what we did. We want them to, we're trying to help them make better decisions. This is what I did in your situation, which is exactly what I just talked about. So and also that we're having clinical discussions about things, not that we're gossiping about them. And sometimes your clients might be gossiping. That's your clients might be gossiping about somebody else. And it's your job also to kind of help them to say, you know what? This is not the place to talk about that stuff. It is normal to have an opinion, standard, or belief about what is wrong, about the way you live your life, and the sense of what is right and wrong. Recognize when you feel compelled to train someone in a manner that is really your personal belief. It is not your place. It is not your role to give your personal views on an individual's choices or decisions. It just isn't. So it's really important that you work on your poker face in that sense. You're empathetic, but your job is not to let them, like, that they would be like almost clueless. Like they would almost be surprised that you have a different perspective than them, because you're so good at being supportive of whatever they're walking through right now, that they're not aware that you have a different opinion, because you are just there for them. And that's the focus. That's your job. Your job is to be there for them. Our goal is to avoid harm. I have to be aware that I'm not opposed and bringing my personal beliefs, values, and behaviors, like what's important to me. How do I recognize, like, if you feel compelled to share a view, it's important that you just keep focused on what's important. Usually when people are spouting views on things that are going on in the world, usually if it's hurting them right then because they're thinking about it, you say something, just kind of respecting what they're feeling, and then you move on to why they're really, needing your services in that way. So when you think of how do you avoid harm, is there anything that you would say? Somebody said a while back about another question was self-care, because I feel like sometimes when I'm taking care of me, then I don't have, and I have good people to talk to, not just about work, but like in people, but like, I'm taking care of myself, then I don't have a need to chum up with my clients. Keeping focus in mind, and it's about my client and not myself. They have the right to determination. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So these are good. It's really is important to kind of review that. And that's why we review these regularly, because it's important to kind of evaluate, am I keeping somebody longer than I need to? Am I not sharing information with them that maybe I would share with somebody else, in terms of to help them out? There's a lot of things if we're asking, and that's why it's important, again, when we have supervision and consultation, we kind of help those things out. So those things come out. Counselors aspire to be open, honest, and accurate communication in dealing with the public. Counselors facilitate access to counseling services, and they practice in a non-discriminatory manner within the boundaries of the professional and personal competence. They also have a responsibility to abide by the ACA codes, which, of course, if you're a social worker, by those codes. In addition, counselors engage in self-care to maintain and promote their own emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, and to the best of their professional responsibility. So I say these things because, again, these are to kind of make you think, ponder life, recognize, yeah, I'm doing okay with that, or, I used to do it. I used to struggle with it more in the past, or that one client gets my attention when we talk. So the struggle is real. We work with people. We are always working on ourselves. We're always aware that, where things could go a little, where the lines could be blurry, maybe. Be aware when you are tempted to feel guilty, feel responsible for not being present when your client wants or needs you. Some people, I say guilty because sometimes people are raised on guilt, and and so they can feel like, if I'm not all that that person wants me to be, then it can feel like it can be a situation where it can be just, are you which always gets them to roll their eyes and laugh, because of course I didn't. I'm not adopting my clients. So, but when you start to feel like you have to like take care of them, you kind of are feeling like it's your responsibility. But you can feel sad if they're walking through something hard. Those are normal feelings, but it's kind of recognizing they do have their own life. They do have their own agency, and I'm only with them for a moment. You hope for the best for them, but in the end, it is their life, and it's not, it's a season that you're with them. Also, like, so thinking, it just takes a few minutes to answer this. I'm not doing anything right now. So what I think of is like, that's like a boundary issue. If like this is not your job, or it's like the weekend and you're like, you notice a text message from, or you get a phone call from a client, and you're looking at your phone, or you're looking at a voicemail, when you're not working. That's something to talk to your clients, to talk to your supervisor about, because that you want to do those things. A long time ago, like way when I first began as a in-home therapist, I remember my supervisor at the time, I admitted to her that I was dreaming about my client, and I thought, in my mind, in my very young mind, I thought, oh, I can't help it. I that I'm dreaming about this person. That's just out of my control. And she was like, what are you doing dreaming about her? Like, you're thinking too much about her. And I realized at that point in time that, that was shocking to me. I was like, I felt like I wasn't responsible for my dreams. But like at the same time, it really evaluated that I was thinking too much about her, and I was concerned about her in a way that, I needed to be more clear with my boundaries. And so I appreciate that. She would say, I'm into burnout prevention. And I appreciate that because I learned from that. And I'm glad I said something, because I needed to change. I needed to recognize that I didn't adopt her. So you want to support the new steps a client is taking, So you support their business financially or give business advice. That's provocative. We want our clients to be successful, but it is your place just to recognize that it is not your place to give business advice. You might even have a business. You might even have an MBA. It is still not your place to give advice. And it's still not your place to support them in any business venture. It is your place to stay in your lane to do the job that you have been given to do. You can refer them to, hey, if you look at this website, you might call this person because they're really good at that, if that's something that comes up. But it's your job to do your best to not be involved in it, and to recognize it's really not your job to help them find a business, or to find, to support them financially in any means. In my agency, there are some times that we have like we can get monies to help a family, like for instance, like if they, for certain, like because they had a house fire and there's some certain things we can buy for them or something. There's certain things that we can do sometimes, for not all the time. We have certain, I'm aware of the parameters. It's never okay for me to say, oh my goodness, I'm so sad because my client just had a fire, so I'm going to give them my money. It's never okay to do that. That changes your relationship completely. They start to look to you, not for therapy or for case management or for any other services. They look at you like, oh, maybe you'll provide for, maybe if I see Karen today, she'll have an extra 20 or 50 to help me out, because I'll just mention I don't have any money for groceries. It's never good. Run the other way. You can acknowledge to other people, tell your supervisor, because sometimes you might not be aware there could be something we can do as an agency, but make sure it's not you. That's not good. That's very bad. Are you tempted to send a familiar picture when they're not with you in person, whatever that meeting is? If you're not having, you're not calling them for a specific purpose, they really shouldn't get anything from you. It shouldn't be like, they're like, with my friends, I might, hear something, see something, take a picture and send it to them because that's what I do with my friends. But it's not appropriate for me to do that with my clients. Give them information about you, your family's personal interests, families, or places you attend. It's really important to do your best to not do that. Being honest with yourself and your supervisor when you have the desire to rescue a client or help them in a way that is outside of your scope of your job. It is okay that you want better for your client. It is not okay to make it happen on your own time or in your own way. Being a renegade, it's like a phrase I've heard a lot. I've heard more recently in different settings of, not work settings, but other settings of like, I'm going to do it on my own terms. Well, I don't know, that was a movie, but with you as a professional, you can't do it on your own terms. It's not appropriate. You need to do it in the terms of what's appropriate based on the ethical standards that you're responsible to, as well as what you're responsible from your employment, what the policies in your agency are. That is what you're responsible for. So you are responsible for excellence in your service provision. It's your job. You do your job the best you can. You're not responsible for the choices your client makes. You're not responsible for the outcomes of their difficult situation. Sometimes this is probably the hardest part of being a therapist. We can't do nothing. We only have a certain role and that we have with them, and we cannot, it's not our job to help them get better, or to help them outside of the scope that we're responsible to do. And sometimes that can be a challenge. I know for sometimes I might gear a client to go, hey, these are the people you need to call for such and such, for a certain service. But it's their responsibility to do that. I'm not responsible for it. I have to let them take their agency, and I can persuade them and I can challenge them, but they're in charge. So I like to do this probably, again, I mentioned earlier, professional self-care. Due to what you do and you do well, it is vital that you take care of yourself. There is no, if that is a challenge for you, I encourage you to talk to your colleagues, your supervisor, reflect on yourself. It's important to refresh. as I'm talking, I'm okay, put in the chat what helps you refresh. You might, try something new. Somebody put something on the chat that's new that sounds like that would be interesting. It's really good for your brain to do different things. It's important for me to do a routine of exercise, rest, socializing, humor, getting a chance to play and do things that are fun. These are important things to do. So you say revived. I know for myself, sometimes it is that I start to make a plan next month of when I can take a day off. Because sometimes I just need to, I like to call it defragging. I need to defrag my brain for my job and from thinking too much. All of us have jobs that are like, it takes a lot of thinking. I need to not think sometimes. So it's important to kind of, what am I going to do after hours? Some of you have, family you're taking care of and other, people that you're responsible for, which, continue education and supervision. Learning something new is helpful. Recognizing that you're always learning. We don't, we go to trainings not because it keeps us from having to do other work. It's because when I'm learning, my brain is expanding in a different way. And that's always good to be open and honest in that, to have that change. So I say this in all trainings, you don't remember 100% of what anybody says. It's always a layers of learning. So I just encourage you, when you are thinking right now of like, as we're ending and wrapping up, is like, what areas were you challenged? What do you want to kind of think about afterwards? Write them down right now, because you'll forget after lunch. You will. So like, it's important because this isn't about me. This is about like, hey, I need to like review this with somebody. Hey, I recognize that the way I when I'm working with Sally, sometimes like I feel like that line, I need to talk to somebody about she likes to push my boundaries. I need to talk about that. Or I've had Johnny forever and I need to like figure out is this really appropriate now, or what should I be doing different? It's in, what 3 areas do you need to improve so that you will grow in your ethical standard? And what happens in the daily, change what happens in the daily. Is there things that you need to do a little different? You are going to, your ability to be teachable, learning from others, whether that is learning from your superior, somebody who's your supervisor, or whether it's the intern, there's stuff to learn. And if I feel like I'm always like, I have got it together and I don't need to hear, I can't learn from somebody that's newer in the field than me or younger than me, then I've really put myself at a serious disadvantage. It is a mark of just being really open, because and if I say, that's one of my mottos, always learning. So if I'm always saying that, then I don't feel like, I need to perform and look awesome to you. I need to, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Thank you for those who participated and were interacting, and this was fun.